And I wrote some things down for this last time, but we didn't really heavily get into it at this period. There we go. Okay. So we kind of ended right here. Nutritional and metabolic requirements of the pregnant woman, and then how are they different from a non-pregnant woman? And I started to write some things down, kind of wrapped up right about here. What are some overall vitamins and minerals that are really key during development of the embryo and the fetus, the process of pregnancy?
Macromolecules.
What?
Like all the macromolecules.
All the macromolecules, proteins, carbs, fats, right? But what else? What does a woman need to intake? Even most important during this phase.
Iron.
Yes, iron. I'm just going to put Fe. That's iron. Folic acid.
Is B12 on?
The B vitamins are good. Yep, all the B vitamins, but that's not super essential. As far as a pregnancy, the main things that a pregnant woman has to up their intake of pretty much 100% over what a non-pregnant individual would take in.
Prenatal vitamins.
Calcium. Yes. Vitamin D. And prenatal vitamins actually have all of these in there at the right daily recommended allowance for pregnant women. So really high, a lot of these things, okay? And actually caloric intake for the average pregnant woman, it doesn't really have to be 2 times what a non-pregnant woman is. It's an increase of about 20% in calories, right? So if a woman normally consumes like 2,000 and they're moderately active, they would take in another 20% in addition to that. So another like 400, 500 calories. But the amount of nutrients, essential vitamins and minerals that they need, in many cases, is double what a non-pregnant woman would need. Okay, so a lot of these things are really, really essential. Why iron? Fe2+. Why iron? They're a woman, they're already going to be depleted. Most women already have lower iron stores. They're already a little bit deficient during the reproductive years. So this is already there. But what is the woman's body building? A body, a lot of tissue, but where do we need iron? Specifically, where does the blood, your red blood cells. Well, the woman's blood actually goes from 5 total liters of blood to about 7 during pregnancy. Massive amount, many increase in thousands of mils of extra blood fluid, red blood cells, and the fetal blood supply is being created. All those little red blood cells and the blood of the fetus that's developing, all of that needs iron. And that's from green leafy vegetables. Prenatal vitamins are the best because they have the right amounts of all these already in them. Calcium sources as well, vitamin D, lean meats and proteins and all that has a lot of iron in it. So it's recommended that pregnant women consume seafood at least a couple times a week, avoiding big giant things like swordfish and shark and albacore white tuna because it has high levels of mercury in it. But a lot of seafood is really good, like fish, different types of fish, shellfish. Lots of those things are really healthy because they have a lot of the good omega-3 fatty acids, healthy proteins, healthy fats. They recommend no more than 6 ounces of tuna a week. I know I broke that. I like tuna too much. I'm like, just gonna have a little bit more. You're trying to avoid the methyl mercury content, some of the big giant fish that's, in the ocean. Vitamin D, also I will say vitamin C. This is also increased in the number or the amount, concentration that you need of this. Vitamin C helps to absorb iron, right? And get it into the digestion and get it into the woman's blood. So vitamin C also goes hand in hand with that. Vitamin D through supplemented foods, through the prenatal vitamins, and through sunlight. So all those things are really critical. It's helping to form a new embryo, all the tissues and structures that go along with that, and also increasing the blood supply and the tissue growth that's going on in the woman's body. It dramatically restructures everything. So the uterus is growing in size. It becomes like more than 10 times the size that it normally is. The breast volume and breast tissue goes up again a couple pounds in weight. So a woman can go from like an A cup to a D cup by the time they're lactating and nursing. So it's tremendous growth of new tissue, growth of fluid, growth of blood. And actually the baby, by the end, what the average woman gains about, I'll just say pounds, and I will say this, it's not every amount or weight is right for every woman, so it depends on whether they start at underweight, at normal weight, or overweight, according to sort of how much weight they typically gain. But the average woman is between 25 and 30 pounds with the total pregnancy length all throughout gestation. That's kind of in the range. That's normal. About 8 pounds is going to baby. About 8 pounds is going to the maternal tissues. So the fluid, the amniotic fluid, the blood, the increase in blood volume, all that weighs more, right? So it's more mass. And then the remainder, that's about 16 pounds. The remainder is all the other tissues, the placental tissues, you know, all the extra embryonic tissues and structures and growth of the entire body. Okay, so a lot of nutritional demands, and I will say really it's only an increase of about a 20% increase in calories or caloric intake, but it's more than 100% plus, so this is like double, I will just say 2 times. You're needing an additional amount of all these different things. And that's to build tissue. That's to build all the proteins, the structure, the organs, the tissues, both in the developing embryo and fetus and in the woman's body. Also the reorganization of the body, I think I showed an image of early stage, mid stage, and late stage pregnancy. The uterus grows so much in size, it ends up coming up and pushing up the diaphragm, right? And moving the GI tract, the stomach, the liver, and even the lungs. It actually opens up the thoracic cavity even more. Believe it or not, the top of the uterus by the end touches almost touches the xiphoid process, which is the bottom of your sternum, plus breastplate. This is why some women also have acid reflux and stuff coming up from the stomach when they eat spicy foods or they eat too much food. The uterus also compresses the inferior vena cava, the vein that brings all the woman's blood back up to her heart. So if you lay too long on your back, compresses that vena cava, it can cause problems in the woman. Shortness of breath, breathing, enough venous return going to the heart. Not supposed to really lay on your back for too long because you don't want to smush that vein that returns blood flow to the heart. It also can cause varicose veins and other things. So there's a lot of things that go along with sort of the overall physiological changes that happen in the woman's body. They actually, respiratory-wise, they get very efficient in their respiration and their cardiovascular output. So the heart is pumping out more blood than ever before. The lungs are super efficient. They're taking in more oxygen and removing more CO2 than they ever have before. So those values go way up with all of this and the reorganization of her body. I will bring up something. The book, our text, The Women's Bio, doesn't really go over this, unless I missed it. I don't think it does. But pica is actually an issue for many women that are pregnant, even in the early stages of pregnancy. A lot of women experience nausea, tiredness, fatigue, all that in the first trimester, first 12 weeks. It's exhausting building all that tissue and all these metabolic demands on the body. And many women nutritionally don't get enough. It's hard to get enough to match that caloric energy that goes into all this. Pica, do you guys know what this is? Yes, you've heard of it? What is pica, Bobby?
Pica is the need to eat something that does not have nutritional value, and
right.
It's usually seen in kids with autism.
Right. So we see pica in a lot of different groups of individuals where they're eating, like she said, they're eating non-food or non-nutritional value matter. And this can be dirt, clay, chalk, rocks, rocks, all kinds of different non-food or non-nutritional things. It affects pregnant women. Actually, many pregnant women will experience pica. They will experience pica. And that's one of the things that's asked when you go to prenatal appointments. When you go to prenatal appointments in the beginning, they ask if you've had a desire to ever eat chalk or dirt or cat litter or clay or anything non-medical. They try to make you feel, don't feel bad about it. Just, are you having that desire to eat any non-food things? Because a lot of that comes down to, at least in the pregnant woman's case, if you can imagine, you need all these vitamins and minerals, and if you're not getting those, either in your vitamins or in your food intake, sometimes the woman starts thinking, okay, I want to eat something that I'm not currently eating. What am I not currently eating? Dirt, chalk. I know it sounds weird, but the brain's like, there's a deficiency and I'm not getting enough. So that is something that sort of has to be addressed. And I remember when I was a young pregnant mom, so I went in and they said, do you have any desire to eat chalk, cat litter, dirt, clay, mud? I thought, no, what? No, absolutely not. But it's a standard thing, and then they give you information on it and say it's okay, this happens to some people. And a lot of times it's a vitamin or it's a mineral deficiency. and you're trying to sort of make up for that. That's one of the ideas of what's behind it. And are cravings real? We talked about this in our pregnancy panel, but do you think cravings are real?
Yeah.
These things are real? Yeah, they're real. I used to think, no, they're not real. They're just an excuse to like eat pickles and chocolate and ice cream or whatever you want to eat. But then going through pregnancy and reading more about it and learning about it, oh, it is real. You will feel like, if you ever go through this, you will feel like you need a certain thing and you just have to have it. Like for me, it was like hamburgers. I didn't even like hamburgers that much. I was like, yeah, hamburgers are cool. Having a good cheeseburger is yummy. But when I was pregnant, I couldn't eat enough hamburgers. I couldn't get enough of the protein, amino acids, and stuff that are in burgers. And I think I told you guys already, I could out-eat anybody. Like if they wouldn't eat their food, I'd eat their food. But it was specifically high protein content that has iron, that has a lot of amino acids and protein. My body was building protein and I wasn't getting enough in other ways, so I could eat a burger and like a shake and then eat another burger. It was crazy. Yeah.
Or like, would you crave things that you don't like? Like, say I don't like pickles now, but then when I'm pregnant, I crave pickles, or is that?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, sort of. For me, it was. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't eat weird, random things that I never ate my whole life, but there were certain things that I never really liked. But then when I was pregnant, especially like first and second trimester, I just wanted a lot of it, like tuna sandwiches. And then I was like not supposed to have a lot of tuna, so that was really hard for me. But I don't know, for some people, yeah, it's something they never really had or they didn't consume a lot of. And for everybody, it's different. Like you'll talk to pregnant people and they're like, I had to have my sandwich every day, my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They get locked in and they just have a certain thing that they like, need to quench or they desire. Yeah.
What kind of foods are rich in folic acid?
Folic acid foods are, there's a lot of different types. There's cereals, a lot of cereals, beans, things like beans, cereals, what else? Oats, not as high. Meats are not that high in folic acid. Sometimes leafy green vegetables have good levels of folate. There's a little diagram, there's a little table in your textbook that goes over all these little high folate things. Also in our nutrition section, we went over some folic acid things. But the best way for a pregnant woman to make sure that she gets enough folic acid is to do the prenatal vitamins. So eat the good varied diet in addition to the vitamin prenatal supplements. That way you guarantee that you're getting enough. This chart just goes over critical periods of human development, going from all the way at the early, like 2-cell stage to implantation. And then, so in this whole period, usually it's not really susceptible to teratogens, so chemicals that cause birth defects. It's not quite implanted all the way, and the placenta is not fully functional. This is very, very early, so it's almost like it's floating and it's kind of doing its own thing. There's not going to be a lot of teratogenic effects until you come later when it's a critical period of the embryo. Week 3 to week 8, there's a lot of different malformations that can happen in the central nervous system, the heart, the eye, ear, the palate, the mouth. All those areas have sort of common sites of teratogen effects in the developing embryo. And then later in the fetal period, from week 9 to week 38 approximately, brain, there can be some teratogenic effects that cause congenital effects in the brain. And also notice here the external genitals. You can't really see, it's right here. External genitals sort of later in the fetal period. So this is showing sort of these windows where teratogens can potentially have really negative effects in different stages of human development.
So what are teratogens?
Teratogens are chemicals that cause teratogenic or birth defects. So they cause congenital defects. So by the time the baby is born, there's going to be some sort of birth defect. We already talked about these, but these are 2 different ways that you can get DNA from the developing fetus and determine if there are any severe genetic or chromosomal conditions. So you can do an amniocentesis where they stick a needle right into the amniotic sac, obtain some amniotic fluid that has cells sloughed off from the fetus and DNA, analyze that DNA. And then even earlier, so you can even do this at about 8 weeks or so, they can go in and take directly from the chorionic villi. Remember, those are the little finger-like projections that make up the developing placenta. Or they can go in with the spinal needle and go in directly and take from the chorion to get little chorionic villi cells to sample. This you have to do a little bit later. It has to be bigger. There has to be more fluid. So both of these can be used to assess for genes and chromosomes in the developing fetus. The hormones of pregnancy, there's a lot of critical hormones that actually help to reshape and grow the embryo, the fetus, the placenta, and the woman's body. Human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG, is what rises in the beginning of pregnancy and is really high until about midway through. That's the hormone that's detected by pregnancy tests. We already did this, right? So we're detecting HCG in the urine, and really this doesn't come up until the placenta, until the embryo implants, right? And there's a little placenta that's starting to develop. That's when HCG starts getting secreted, and you can pick it up in the blood and therefore in the urine. So that's what really starts to rise, and it goes high until about, I don't know, week 24 of pregnancy. It stays pretty high. It kind of peaks. Total estrogen levels also go up throughout pregnancy, and the estrogen levels will sort of steadily go up, up, up. The placenta is making that. It's also making progesterone. Really critical. Progesterone actually is initially coming from the corpus luteum, but remember the placenta starts getting really functional and putting out a lot of these different hormones. It actually puts out a lot of different hormones. These are just some of the key ones. And it helps to maintain the uterine lining and allow the uterus to grow and maintain the developing fetus and the growth of the uterus. So really, P and E help to maintain and sustain the developing fetus and the development of the uterus. Interestingly, progesterone actually is kind of a smooth muscle relaxant. So when the woman's body, progesterone levels go up by the developing placenta, it actually serves to relax smooth muscle. That means allow the uterus muscles to stay not contracting, right, to prevent them from contracting, to stay in a relaxed state. It also causes relaxation of arteries, blood vessels throughout the body. That means they open up. So the woman's blood pressure actually goes down because her vessels are opened up a little more, and it triggers her kidneys to retain more salt and water. It goes, ooh, wait, pressure is low. A lot of the arteries are relaxed and opened up, and so let's trigger a hormone cascade from the kidneys that hangs on to water and salt. And do you remember one of those hormones we talked about that comes from the adrenal cortex, and it affects salt and water balance? Do you? Aldosterone. Yes, aldosterone coming from the adrenals tells the kidneys, hang on to water, hang on to salt, we gotta make sure blood pressure doesn't go too low. That causes retention of more fluid. So hanging on to more fluid, hanging on to more of that salt and that water, and that helps to, that is part of the process of the pregnant woman's body. So many women, especially in the first trimester, first 12 weeks, experience morning sickness or nausea, and again, that's from these rising levels of sex steroid hormones, progesterone and estradiol. They actually affect the hypothalamus and parts of the brain, and they cause nausea. So I found that I really didn't barf, but I would get lightheaded. I would get this lightheaded, sort of nauseous feeling, almost like I've been on a boat or something if I didn't eat. So as soon as I woke up, like this is why it's morning sickness. You have an empty stomach, you have nothing in your stomach, that's when those effects are usually more pronounced. That's why I call it morning sickness. Although I've had friends and my mom and other people, they barfed all the time. It didn't matter if it was morning or not. I found that I could just eat and just eat healthy little snacks, make sure I didn't have an empty stomach, and I didn't have to experience this. This varies dramatically between women though. One woman can barf almost the entire pregnancy, another woman won't at all. They'll just get a little lightheaded and have to eat. That was sort of more my situation. Due to those rising steroid hormones affecting the brain, that's why. Some also experience mood changes, moodiness. It can be very minor to even very severe, right? We talked about that in our pregnancy panel with the guest speakers. Some of them really experienced during pregnancy and also postpartum anxiety and depression, and had real effects on their brain and their behavior, and they're just dealing with the whole situation. It's really difficult. So after delivery, it's postpartum depression or anxiety or just postpartum blues. A lot of moodiness can just be a part of the process. You're having the hormones that normally cycle in your menstrual cycle, right? But they don't go up really high. These are hormones that are going up, and now they're staying high, and they're going up to higher levels throughout the pregnancy. So obviously that can have an effect on mood, right? It can have an effect on mood and overall feelings and experience. Yeah?
Is postpartum anxiety the same thing as postpartum mania, or are those two different things?
They're different. They're different. So there's a whole bunch of sort of, mania is more like up and down.
Okay.
It's more like up and down, extremes, yes. And depression is more just low, very feeling sort of sad and low. Not just sad, it's more than that, right? It's more like, it's categorized as sort of a mood disorder during that period of time. Now, I didn't experience that. I got a little moody, like I told you guys. Like, I would cry at weird commercials that I normally wouldn't cry in, so I'd get a little touchy-feely about stuff. Also, you have to imagine, the body is going through a dramatic reorganization, right? Your whole body's changing. How you've seen yourself and how you've looked like your whole life, all of a sudden now it's just getting totally out of whack, something you're not used to. You know, tummy's getting bigger, breasts are getting bigger. You have to walk a little bit differently. Some women experience discomfort. Some just have a different center of gravity, and all the ligaments are kind of loosening up a little bit. Many pregnant women, especially in third trimester, will experience lordosis. That means where you have sway back, right? Your butt sort of arches out and your belly kind of goes forward. It almost looks like they're walking like this, you know what I'm saying? And they have to sit down and lay down. It's because the center of the gravity and all that is kind of restructuring. And so many pregnant women will experience that, and actually some back complications as well because the weight coming in the front part of the body. So a lot of that too, for everybody, they sort of, oh my gosh, my body is going through this crazy reorganization. Some women also experience the umbilicus, the belly button that kind of ends up popping out, right, because it's taking up all the tissue is stretching and expanding. Striae or stretch marks is another thing. Some women experience it, and usually it's due to hormone, these high hormone levels. It's not really due to a stretching of the skin, although that contributes. A lot of people think, like during development in puberty and the breasts and the hips and the thighs and stuff, a lot of the striae are just from growing really fast. That is only part of it. Really, it's the levels of these sex steroids. They actually allow the skin to get those striae or those stretched appearance lines very easily. So I would say during one of my things, it doesn't work for everybody, I lathered on cocoa butter every single day of my pregnancy. Got not one single stretch mark. And I just was greased up constantly, just cocoa butter, coconut that had coconut oils in it. I had other friends that did the same thing. I went through like 8 giant things of them with every single pregnancy. Never got a stretch mark. But that also has to do with sort of predisposition, body type, you know, all those different factors. And then some women, they get really, really big, and the striae are almost unavoidable to get little stretch marks at least at some point. Yeah.
What, like, if there are high levels of hormones, it causes stretch mark?
Hormones are linked with that, yes. But it doesn't happen to every woman.
Like,
so it also has to do with your skin and your probably genetic predisposition, and because those hormones go up in every woman, but not every woman experiences the striae that go along with pregnancy, typically on the belly or the lower abdomen. Not everybody gets it. It's variable. So for me, I just tried to just stay moisturized with just different natural coconut oils and those kinds of things, and that helped. For me, it helped. All right, so the hormones that actually go up, this actually shows a key with total estrogen shown here in pink, going all the way up. This is percent of the highest mean value. So the percent of the highest mean value means the highest mean value then is 100%, and that's at the end of the pregnancy. It slowly is ramping up throughout the pregnancy from day 1 of the last menses, because remember that's how we mark pregnancy, is the first day of the last menstrual period. It's like day 1 of the pregnancy, even though development didn't begin until ovulation. Development of the embryo and fetus is not exactly the same as the actual length of gestation. So estrogen goes way, way up. Progesterone in green goes way up by the end. HCG is really high, especially in the first half of the pregnancy. The placental weight, of course, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger here in yellow. Prolactin, in the thick red one, is also going up, up, up. So these are hormones that are helping to maintain the growth and development of the fetus and the uterus itself and structures of the female's body. There's these critical hormones are actually coming from, so here's the placental tissue, here's the amniotic sac represented, so the fetal compartment, and then how these hormones are being made. Here's the maternal blood. So in the maternal blood, these vessels that are going up right around the chorionic villi, so they're surrounding and a part of the maternal side of the placenta. Those blood vessels are here, and this is exchanging material through the placenta to the developing fetus and then back and forth to the mom. Notice cholesterol in the maternal blood is used by the placenta to make progesterone. Remember, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, those are lipids. Remember the biological molecules, lipids, and they are made with the precursor of cholesterol. Progesterone is made, goes into fetal blood, it gets converted by the adrenal cortex of the fetus to other types of androgens. Okay, again, other types of androgens. This gets converted by the fetus to estriol, which is a type of estrogen. So the placenta ends up pumping out estrogen and progesterone, or estriol and progesterone, that affects and gets carried by the maternal blood. So all of these are affecting developing fetus and mom's body. So cholesterol is a precursor, I want to highlight that, and progesterone and an estrogen. Total estrogens go up a lot of different kinds, but those are really key to development and the placenta. There's a couple interesting things about development of the fetus and crossover between the maternal and fetal materials. Sometimes fetal stem cells from this early developing fetus will cross over, get through the placenta, and go to the maternal bloodstream and get carried into her blood and tissues. Now the maternal immune system can attack the fetal cells, and then sometimes what happens is they end up attacking their own cells, and autoimmune diseases can develop post-pregnancy. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all, and the maternal blood and tissues just contains some of these fetal cells for years after the pregnancy. In other words, it's like a mosaicism or mosaic. There are other types of human cells in the maternal blood supply, even way later, because there's a little bit of crossover that can happen. Same thing with getting in through the umbilicus, the umbilical cord, and into the fetal supply. There can be maternal stem cells. They get into the fetal blood and tissues. If this can happen, sometimes there's a fetal attack on the maternal, and then its own cells, which can result in autoimmune disease. So some of these are sort of believed to be some of the causes for certain autoimmune diseases, if too much of this happens. Sometimes this happens just a little bit normally, it's not a problem. You can detect these cells in foreign DNA. But sometimes it's thought to believe that it's linked with autoimmune diseases. And we know that the woman's immune system is sort of hyperactive, more so than the male. So with this process, it can often lead to, especially during the reproductive years in women and in their 30s and 40s, the development of autoimmune diseases that can come later. All right, so the actual childbirth itself. So we talked a lot about pregnancy, the hormones of the placenta, the restructuring of the woman's body, her nutritional needs. Now, actually, that was all gestation, right? So it was all throughout the stages of pregnancy and the development of the embryo and then the fetus. Childbirth now, we'll say gestation is pregnancy. It's about 266 days or 40 weeks. But the actual childbirth is parturition. Parturition is really the pushing, so the actual labor, the childbirth of the baby, okay? So high levels of progesterone and estrogen maintain the pregnancy, okay? And the maternal and fetal tissues make sure the uterus is nice, it's not contracting, all throughout the pregnancy. There are little small contractions that happen often for most women throughout pregnancy. Smooth muscle that is lining the myometrium, so the uterine sort of thick muscle part of it. And I passed around those models in class, right? And those were sort of true to life and true to scale. The uterus is huge and it's very thick. It gains in a lot of mass and thickness to it. Progesterone levels and estrogen levels go up high throughout pregnancy, and they really help to not allow the uterus to really contract forcefully, so they keep it sort of relaxed. However, there are little contractions. They're almost like butterfly contractions, and those can happen, especially in the third trimester, so near the end. And those are like 15, 20 minutes apart, and they're like 30 seconds or 20 seconds or 40 seconds. Tiny little contractions where they feel like little crampy. It's almost like little crampy. A lot of women mistake that for actual childbirth or parturition going into this process, and it's called false labor. There are false labor contractions. Have you guys heard of that, Braxton Hicks? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what those are. Those are almost like the uterus is starting to ramp up. It's just getting little light contractions start going. It doesn't mean the woman is in labor. It's just early contractions. And let me tell you, I thought that I was going in labor. I started having these toward the end, and I would get, oh my God, I'm having contraction, a little cramp. Then it'd be gone, and it wouldn't happen for like half an hour or a couple hours, and then they'd come back the next day, really small. A lot of women mistake that, and they sometimes go to the hospital too early. They're having those Braxton Hicks uterine contractions. They don't really hurt. They just feel like little cramps, bless you, little fluttery cramps. So parturition is what we call the actual childbirth process, and it comes in 3 stages. And I'm going to kind of outline the stages and give you a little glimpse into how it actually goes from a personal standpoint. Labor, we call all the events that expel or push the infant out of the uterus. So that's what you call labor. And believe me, it's called labor for a reason. I've never labored so hard at anything in my entire life. 3 times. So you have the position of the baby. Normally the normal position is head facing down on the cervix. So let's just reorganize, remember, or reorient to sort of the anatomy of the female body, right? The vagina or vaginal canal. The cervix is sort of the neck, the opening, tiny little opening that separates vagina from uterus. During the process of pregnancy, the cervix is completely closed up. It's tight, it's closed, there's mucus in there, there's no sort of getting from vagina into the uterine space. This is already starting to sort of open up and push on the cervix and open up that actual space and make it dilate. So there's the cervix and then there's the actual uterus. Typically by the end, especially towards the later weeks of the 3rd trimester, the baby's head is in the downward position and they're typically getting so big they're getting fat. It's in the last several weeks of pregnancy, a baby can gain anywhere from a ½ pound to about a pound a week. So at the end, they're really getting fat. They're getting thick. Okay, they're putting on more weight. And before that, remember we said even before that, like at the end of the 2nd trimester, beginning of the 3rd, that's when the baby actually has a better survival rate on if they are born or there's early labor that happens at that point. But often they are very thin. They're very small. They're anywhere from 4 to 6 pounds. Or smaller, really, really tiny, and they're thin. They don't have a lot of body mass at that point. They also are often born with lanugo or hair. They're little peach fuzz hair that are all over their bodies. Sometimes the babies are still born a little hairy because they still have a little of that lanugo, and they have a vernix caseosa. Your book talks about all this. And it's a lipidy, fat, white, creamy, almost like a moisturizer that kind of is all over the baby and it kind of lubricates them, helping to sort of keep their skin good and intact. They're in a watery environment. Think about it. They're floating in water, and now they're peeing in water. You know, they're helping to make this amniotic fluid. So if the woman reaches the end, near the 40 weeks, the baby has now gained in mass and is fatter and thicker, right, and contributing to the amniotic fluid and all that. Facing down, the baby's head now starts to smash, and that's a lot of weight, onto the actual cervix. So going through the process of labor, this is how it gets triggered, the hormones that actually trigger it. Here's the baby, here's the placenta, so here's the maternal side of the maternal tissues, and then here's the myometrium, or the muscular layers of the uterus. So what happens is there's a bunch of different hormone cascades that are happening between baby, placenta, uterine tissue, and then mom and mom's brain. Just simplified to know, the baby's head starts pushing down on the cervix, right? So it's aiming down. Usually head is in that position unless it's breech and it's rump or legs first, but typically head down. Starts to push on that cervix, okay? And initiate all of this process where there's stretch on the cervix and stretch throughout the myometrium. There's some different hormones that start to get produced.